Hello everyone and welcome to this video. My name is Mauri. Today we'll be looking at opening trap number 2. I call this one a loose piece in the Caro-Kann. So before we look at today's games, let me just quickly show you what I mean by loose piece. So loose piece is an unprotected piece, which is also called a hanging piece. That's often a weakness that can be exploited. And tactics often can revolve around these loose pieces. In fact, we have in chess this saying Indeedio, which stands for loose pieces drop off. All right, so let's get to our main game in the Caro-Kann. So e4, c6, this is the Caro-Kann that black is playing. Very solid opening. And the normal move here is d4, very good move, but we are going to play knight f3. That's what we need to do this trap. Just a little backstory about this trap. It was first shown to me by my brother, who is a strong chess player, plus 2200 FIDE. He'd been doing it in a couple of games on the internet, and then he showed me. So I tried it out, and it's a lot of fun because a lot of people actually fell for this. I can now find 6 games in my database where my opponents did fall for this trap, and I ended up winning all of those games. So just shows again the usefulness of knowing certain things which you can then reuse. So let's see how that trap goes. After knight f3, black of course replies with d5. And then we play e5, which is a key move in this trap. So you'll see why we need to do that in a few more moves. So black plays bishop g4, getting his bishop out. We play bishop e2, and they play e6. So that's why they played bishop g4, because they wanted to get their bishop out of the pawn chain before playing e6, which is very logical. But now that bishop can't go back, which actually also is important for our traps, which we'll see very soon. So after c3, we're actually setting up this trap. And I think the reason why many fall for this trap is that when they look at the move c3 from the black side, they might think that we are trying to build a really cool pawn chain from b2 to e5, and that our next move is pawn from d2 to d4. So if they do think that, then they're very likely to fall for this trap and play the move c5. So now we can win material with a fork. So white to move and win material with a fork. The move is queen a4 check. So what this does is that, apart from checking the king, also attacks the bishop on g4. So the bishop on g4 is the loose piece that drops off. Black will have to do something about this check. So knight c6, and then we just take the bishop. All right. So we're a piece up, and we have a winning position, but we haven't won it yet. But let me also, just before we go any further, let me show you what happens if after c3, if they do not play c5. In one of my games, my opponent played knight e7, didn't fall for the trap, but we can still hope that they will on the next move. So while we're waiting for that to happen, we can just do a useful move of our own, which is to castle. So now we're basically just following the golden rules. And in one of the games this happened, and then he did actually fall for the trap. So with c5, and then of course queen a4, and he blocked the check, and I took the bishop. So that was the game Liquid Nimis versus Scene Prisa in 2007. All right, but back to our main game. After after c3, c5, falling into the trap, queen a4 check, knight c6. Queen takes bishop. Like I said before, we are a piece up, but we haven't won the game yet. So it's one thing to have a winning position. It's another thing to actually win. So when you have a winning position, don't think that it is over. That's a very common mistake. You have to keep fighting and convert that winning position into an actual win. Your opponent might not always resign just because you have a winning position. So then you have to keep focusing. So that's why I want to show you how I did that in two games. The main game being Krami versus Tushev from 2008, which we're following. After knight ge7, I played bishop e5, and what I like about this move is that I'm getting ready to basically just trade pieces, which is what you should do when you are winning on points, when you're ahead in material, in other words. So I just want to take the knight on c6. He goes knight f5, so I do that. I take on c6, and I've traded pieces. When you have an extra piece like you have now, white has 3 minor pieces versus 2 from black, then if you trade off all the pieces equally, then you will end up just with an extra piece that will be unopposed. That piece will be very powerful. So that's why it's very good to trade pieces when you're ahead. Castles d4, queen e4, attacks the pawn on c6, queen d7, and now g4. It's a little bit double-edged because normally I wouldn't want to push the pawn that's in front of my king, but I estimated that in this particular case, black wouldn't really put my king in too much danger, which proved to be a correct assessment. So this move actually also wins a pawn and forces the black knight on f5 away from the center, so to h6, which is what he chose. So now we can win a pawn with c takes d4, c takes d4, and knight takes d4. The bishop c5, I could actually take the pawn on c6, but the move that I chose seems to be actually the strongest move. Knight b3, bishop b6, and d4. After rook c8, now I could have, and probably should have, taken on h6, just keep trading pieces, and doesn't hurt to cripple his pawn structure either. But I played knight c3. How bad can it be to develop a piece? So a5, knight c5, and look at that knight on c5. That's a very good square for a knight in this case, where it cannot be chased away by any pawns. Queen a7, and now I did take, and queen e3 to defend my knight that was attacked by the bishop on b6 and x-ray attacked by the queen on a7. Rook g8, and now I didn't even care about that pawn on g4. I correctly estimated that it was actually completely fine to give him that pawn, so I would actually be likely to get some play on the g file, and here I just wanted to get my pieces to better squares. So I played knight 3 to e4, which according to Stockfish in 2018, 10 years after this game was played, is the strongest move. So knight 3 to e4. He took with check, and I played king h1. So even if he's allowed to take with check, this is still quite strong for white. So I'll just show you why that is. After king e7, we play rook g1. Now he could have played here, but there are some nice lines where white is winning in all cases. Rook takes g4, rook takes g4, and now knight d6 is actually incredibly powerful. Now I don't remember if I saw all of this in the game. This is something that Stockfish told me now 10 years after I played it, so who knows what I saw, can't remember. But yeah, the threats are simply too many. I'm threatening the fork on c8, and I'm also threatening queen f3, which threatens to take the rook on g4 and threatens to come in to f7, and in a case where rook g7 wouldn't help because of or wouldn't help very much, I think, because of queen f6 and so forth. So yeah, so white's just completely winning in all lines here. So after rook g1, yeah, so it was like this, rook g1, he played king e7, I played rook g1. If he does take, I'll just take, and then my pieces are just very well placed, and will have lots of entry squares into the black camp, like f6, d6, and so forth, g7, probably f7 and whatnot. Yeah, but my opponent, he kind of panicked here after rook g1 and took on c5. I'm not sure what he was thinking, but he is giving me that rook here. So he did get that pawn on d4, so maybe he was very happy to get that pawn. And here the strongest move was queen takes h6, and again white is just coming into his house. Bishop takes e5, for example. If he does that, then queen g5, f6, queen g7. That's a skewer, and it's also a continued attack against the black king. So that would be basically just game, set, and match pretty soon. I didn't play queen h6 in this position. I played queen a3 check, which is not as strong. c5, knight d6, attacking the rook. Rook goes away, and now we have a nice little tactic, which is rook takes d4, and here my opponent resigned. The reason is that if he recaptures on d4, now we have two ways of winning black's queen with a discovered check, or disco check as I like to call them. One is knight b5, winning the queen, and the other one is knight c8, which not only is a disco check but also a double check, so a double disco check. Alright, so let's quickly see the second game, or maybe technically the third game that we've looked at today. But the second game where black doesn't immediately resign. We'll just review quickly what the trap was. We go e4, c6, knight f3, d5, e5, important move, key move, because that clears the fourth rank. Bishop v4, bishop e2, e6, c3, setting up the trap. He maybe thinks we're going to build that green pawn chain that you see there. c5 and queen a4 wins the bishop. Knight c6, queen takes g4, knight e7, and instead of bishop b5, I played in that other game castles, knight g6, d4, h5, attacked my queen, queen h3, c takes d4, c takes d4, rook c8, knight c3, develop the pieces, a6, bishop e3. Notice how I'm connecting my rooks and developing all of my minor pieces. Knight ce7, knight h4. I want to trade pieces just like in that last game. Queen e6, and here I actually missed something which is kind of nice, which was knight takes g6, knight takes g6, and now there is a pin and another loose piece which allows this nice little move here, knight takes d5. The point being that if you take this knight, then you lose the rook like that, so that would win another pawn. So I missed that. Instead of that, I played rook ab1, protecting my pawn. He takes, I take. He goes knight f5, queen f4, bishop e7, and now knight takes d5. So this is yet another tactic that we're seeing here in this game. This one actually did spot because I did do this. This one is called overloading, or the overworked piece. So meaning there is a piece that basically has too many jobs and it can't do all of them. The pawn on e6 has in this position two jobs. So it's trying to defend the knight on f5 and the pawn on d5. But if you put it to the test, it actually can't do both. So that's why we can just win this pawn here. So yeah, so if he takes, then we take here. So he didn't take, he played queen d8, but now we can continue to trade pieces, which is what we want when we are material ahead. So knight takes e7, queen takes e7, and here I played d5, and my opponent had seen enough and resigned. He could have fought on, so let's just see what could have happened. First of all, I don't think he would have fallen into this very simple trap where he just loses this piece. Maybe he would have castled if he had played on, and then I would have played d6, and I won't go into any further analysis of this position. We are a piece and a pawn up, and the pawn on d6 is what we call a protected pass pawn, a very powerful thing as well. Excuse me. So yeah, so that's that would be a pretty winning position. You can if you want to see if you're able to win this against somebody, then just set up this position on the chessboard and play against somebody, see if you can beat them. But you should be able to beat pretty much anyone from this position as white. So that was the opening trap number 2, called a loose piece in the Caro-Kann. And I hope you enjoyed watching. Hope you maybe learned something from it as well, and who knows, maybe you can do this trap in one of your own games. So e4 c6, instead of d4 we go knight f3, d5, e5, bishop g4, bishop e2, e6, c3, which sets up that trap where he maybe thinks we're going to do the pawn chain. If he does c5, he's now fallen into our trap. Queen a4 and wins. All right, thanks again for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye bye.